Derek Gherkin.
Present.
Terry Lapp. Here. Trish McLean.
Present.
Todd Schneider.
Here.
Lauren Sharp.
Here.
Melissa Smits.
Present.
Connie Weingarten.
Present.
If you'll stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is approval of the previous minutes.
Move to approve the previous minutes. Second.
Okay, we have a first motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Derek Gherkin.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda and any agenda changes.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Roll call.
Derek Gherkin.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the opportunity for the audience. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Okay. Moving on to our FMHS student representative. We don't have a student representative.
Did she go to the football game? Did they take the cheer?
Bet they do.
They may have. I think they're on their way to Palisade, are they not?
No.
Oh, no, not till.
Oh, when is that? Oh, that's
the game's
Saturday.
yeah,
Saturday.
Oh,
Saturday.
okay.
So-
That's good. Somebody told me today they're. I'm like, wow, you're going early.
So we'll move on to board reports. Are there any board reports?
Yeah.
Okay. This isn't really a report. Normally, when somebody has a comment for the board, I would make them come and give it to the board themselves. But Jerry Watham had some very good things to say about the students, so I'm going to relay a message from Jerry, since he's preparing to be an election judge tomorrow and has a bright and early morning. I guess the Student Senate and Mr. Edson have taken on the community Thanksgiving, and he had a lot of good things to say about the kids and Mr. Edson for doing that, and he wanted to publicly thank Mr. Edson and the Student Senate for doing so.
That's great.
So, shout out to Mr. Edson and the kids of the Student Senate. Any other board reports? Okay.
I think I've attended 2 Head Start meetings here, and they're, I think, doing really well considering all the transition and stuff that they're going through right now. I think they're doing really well. And Rena rocked out the grant application, so woohoo!
Thank you, Rena.
Any more board reports? Moving on to superintendent.
All my reports, Mr. Gherkin, are under discussion items.
Okay. Dr. Frasco?
I have no report.
Okay. That brings us to Mr. Lee.
I'm still scrolling.
You got you a lot faster than you anticipated.
Okay. I guess the more mundane things, important but mundane at the same time, would be September financials. Nothing really of highlight, I guess. This is a quarter-end financial statement. Why won't that come up? Does your financials come up? I added on pages 6 starting on page 2, 3, and 4. This is a quarterly financial presentation. Man. Never mind. That's not the one I wanted to show you. I don't have anything else to tell you on the financials. Kind of business as usual. Pretty much on track. The next item, let's go to the Head Start Wing Edition cost update.
Are we going in order of the least scary to the most scary?
Well, with me, you never know, so it's always a surprise. This is actually a repeat of what I've already sent the board, but there are some pretty big numbers on here, so I wanted to take just a couple minutes and see if there was any questions the board had. This is a little bit more expanded into the previous updates I've given the board. I've actually broke down the on the top section our metal building costs, purchase numbers, the original bid, our change order numbers, added some of our soft cost details to that to get to a total current construction cost estimate of $3,824,000, which is kind of right in the middle of the page there. And then back off the $2.6 million Head Start grant, obviously, that we've received for the project, leaves us 1.2. And then I expanded our insurance claim information to break that down for the board. We had total claims between Sherman Modulars, the 4 Sherman Modulars, and the Pioneer Modular. We actually expended $50,000 to mitigate the mold so those modulars could be used for the rest of that school year. So that came out of our insurance proceeds. We had a $5,000 deductible. And then we spent $25,000 that we'd earmarked of that demo of the Pioneer Modular for the construction of a new storage facility. So that was the $25 grand, which the board had already approved. And then the actual demolition cost. So we have $281,000 of net insurance monies that I had earmarked in our Fund 18, our insurance fund for the project. Once again, that's kind of repetitive information. But the $942,000 would be then our net out-of-pocket cost. And I just gave you a funding recap there, which the board has preliminary kind of approved our earmarking of our small school district additional funding that we received for 17-18, 18-19, $521,000, $534,000. So that was $1 million of supposed to be one-time money that turned out to be two-time money. But that was $1,055,000. Our total cost out of pocket for our RE3 is $942,000. So that leaves us $113,000 of remaining of our small school district funding that we do have to keep track of and earmark, and capital expenditures that benefit student and activities is appropriate utilization of that. So we have a ton of projects that could, where that $113,000 could go. But that's how we're paying for effectively the Head Start edition, is that $1 million from our small district funding for the legislature, one time turned into be two-time. A couple other things, we have some further change orders. That nothing is real material, but there are some final change orders that are coming to the district that are going to be out of our pocket. They're not going to materially change these numbers, but as we've kind of been winding down the project, there just seems to be kind of one thing after another that we're addressing or expanding or modifying. Nothing of any material nature. I think we've bid off the bigger, more expensive components of this project, so I think that's kind of behind us. A couple things I wanted to expand on for the Head Start construction project that kind of relates more to some administration items. We had the board approve and we had policy council approve a request for a carryover of the construction money from 2017-18 over to 2018-19. And we were going to have you reaffirm that decision this evening because there's a certain pecking order that National Head Start likes to see how that process goes. So we were going to have you do that, but as grueling as it was, spent a good portion this last week kind of grinding out all the finances and numbers on this Head Start project, and had a couple different conversations with Regional Head Start. The first one of these is, this was a grant project that was awarded and for the sole purpose of constructing a full wing addition to Sherman Early Childhood Center for the benefit of Head Start. That award was known to going to be take longer than a year because we couldn't get that done in that 1 month period when school got out by June. So it was known that that was going to have to be a carryover project. We had approved all of those contracts for the construction of Sherman Early Childhood Center, not only our soft cost contractors for architecture, engineering, those kind of things, but also the main general contractor and all the subs below them. And Head Start has a weird rule, which is, as Terry will get this is not a GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. This is not a GAAP process, but if you have your expenditures encumbered by the end of June, Head Start will let you expend those by the end of September, and you can count those backwards as if you incurred those by June 30th, even though some of those expenses were not even done by June 30th, which is our normal process for appropriate cutoff for our financials that I present to you in the annual audit. We have to receive goods or had services rendered by June for me to count that as accounts payable or accrued expense in our year-end financials. But Head Start has an encumbrance quirky rule that allows that. So it was just such an ironic process that this is just ridiculous. We're going to have to go through this whole grant reapplication for this carryover when we know that that project was going to take longer than the period of time. So further discussions, I've convinced the Regional Head Start to give us an additional 30 days of extension to complete the payment of all of our construction costs related to the Head Start building, to the extent of the $2.6 million relates to the Head Start grant, because I'm spending their money first, and our money, that $970,000, comes on the back end. So by giving me another month, I paid a $950,000 construction draw to Sampson Construction, and I just paid last week, and I actually wrote the check on the 30th of the remaining, well, was not the remaining, but it was $550,000, which took us up to the $2.6 million. So getting another 30-day extension let us spend our full $2.6 million. So then I filed my annual report with Head Start National, which is due October 30th for period June 30th. So I showed a full $2.6 million of construction costs expended by October 31st, relative backwards to June 30th, so that requirement for the carryover grant request has gone away. Make any sense, sort of, kind of?
Just
Government at its best, let me tell you.
had to be difficult.
The second piece of that is, as I'm going through this process, and I had finalized all of our operational grant dollars, we were going to have about $50,000 of funds remaining in our 2017-18 operational grant for Head Start. So a little further lobbying, I've allowed them to see a pathway that we had a lot of costs that weren't raw construction costs. We did some expansion of electrical service, we did ground tests, we did soil tests, we did all kinds of other things, design work, some inspections that weren't raw construction dollars. So that process, they've allowed me to take that $50,000 of unspent operational grant monies and earmark those as actually being spent on qualified non-capital construction. They were related processes, but they were all contracted professional services, not bricks and mortar kinds of things. So we've actually been able to move an additional $50,000 to our Head Start operational grant to help cover some of those costs. So we've now freed up $50,000 that we otherwise wouldn't have had, which we're going to go right into picking up a playground expansion, which we didn't think we were going to have to do initially, which we are going to have to do, and that was at least 40 grand. So we're going to be able, I think, be able to pay for our entire playground expansion, redo, retrofit, replacement, which would qualify for an operational grant if all that would have been known clear back in, say, March of 2018. So a couple positive things that are going to close out this grant, make my life easier, and get some additional revenue for RE3 to cover that playground cost. And they'd already sent the extension letter approval to the national office, and that's been approved. And so I think we're crawled over a big hump in this grant extension stuff that Rena was very helpful trying to get that going with policy council and things, but that whole process has kind of gone away. So with that last payment to Sampson, I did on the 30th actually. Now we're moving into, I'm going to be paying these remaining $900,000 of bills out of RE3 money, which we were going to do anyway, but now we won't have to do that carryover request and get approval and that whole re-ratification. So questions about the Head Start, finances, and kind of what's going on? And
What's the new opening target date?
funny you should ask. Had construction meeting today, and we were supposed to get the building last Wednesday. We will get the building on next Wednesday, and our most recent communication to that, I think Rena communicated, and Dr. Hammock was there in attendance as well, to the Head Start folks, and I think to the parents who were totally disappointed we've not been able to get this done for our Head Start parents and Head Start families. But school would still start on the 13th, just as 19th, excuse me. Freudian slip, thank you.
That's 19th.
So we've got inspections to do, a variety of local and state inspectors, as well as the daycare.
Licensing.
Daycare, yeah, I guess you call it daycare, or not daycare, it's,
Yeah, it is.
yeah, okay, daycare licensing. We do have one snag, and that is that the windows, if you've driven by there are no windows. The windows were ordered, they're at the factory, and they've assured us that the windows for the exterior of the building will be here, and they'll put those in on Monday and Tuesday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. And the question from RE3 is, well, what happened Saturday and Sunday? So I've not heard a response back from that yet, but we'll have exterior windows in, but the interior windows are somewhat in question mark. So normally you wouldn't necessarily think that would be an issue, I guess, you know, this view windows out, but that may be a licensing issue, and we're going to be finding out tomorrow if that possibly jeopardizes our temporary certificate of occupancy to be ready to go on the 19th, which I don't have an answer for that, but RE3 is pushing every possible button to make sure that those windows are here and done. But some of that, if they're not manufactured yet, there could be possible delay. as horrible as that sounds. I'm going to know more tomorrow, so we'll communicate that as soon as we definitively know that. The other stuff is coming on board. We've got movers lined up to come move all the the furniture and supplies. That has to be in place for the daycare inspector to see the room as it was set up, even though we still have plenty of time to do that before kids showed up, but it has to be in there and somewhat organized for the inspector to come in and do that. They're still going to be working on some playground stuff and some exterior things, but our focus is to get the Head Start kids in there and going. And questions or comments other than what the heck? So I should know tomorrow some additional information about that whole process, and we'll see how that goes. The other thing I wanted to give you a brief update on, this is the FPP School Finance. I got this today. Had school finance last week, but then they sent out the update, because this is what apparently the new school finance request is going to look like, and I won't spend a whole lot of time. If you go to page 2, you can see kind of a quick recap of where we have been over the past 4 years. We had a baseline of 16-17, goes into 17-18. We had a per pupil funding increase of $242 per funded pupil count. Then this current budget that we're under this year was now $475 for increased, and that was our approximately $2 million of additional funding that we realized. And then the 1920 request is an additional that takes our total pupil funding up from 8,137 per pupil up to 8,400, which is an additional $358 per student. So not quite as large an increase as it was last year, but still a reasonable increase in funding. Of course, this is without anything that might happen tomorrow on whether Amendment 73 is successful or not. So this is what the initial request is going to be for overall funding. So that was at least some initial good news, and you can see from the budget stabilization factor, which is really the negative factor, you can see that number is shrinking, and that's been one of the objectives. Is if you can envision 800 and, or excuse me, now we're down to 595 million of what has been subtracted from school finance from what we used to be prior to the recession starting in 08 and 09. So still improvement, but it's still at levels below where K-12 education used to be. Any questions on that? I handed out just a little bit of information, just came across my desk today. It's just the it's a United States wide total state and local ballot measures that are on the ballot for tomorrow, and those total 76.3 billion, which is the highest amount or close to it for clear back to 2006. You can see where that's been over the past year. So just a lot of interest in infrastructure, construction dollars, utilities, and some school finance. And they noted in this article on the third page of that, Colorado for its transportation initiatives, and then also for the school-wide funding, made notation of both of those for Colorado. So once again, we'll see what happens to those tomorrow. The last thing I wanted to share with you, Dr. Hammack and I met this morning with, were you going to chat about this, Dr. Hammack, or the Kaboom?
Go ahead, I'll.
Okay. Just gave you a quick kind of update here. We met with the surveyor to get our piece of ground identified, what we actually own in that little stretch from Landmark Trailer Park down to Pioneer School. And if you look at I believe the second picture first, that's a more global view. Does that kind of zero in? Can you? Oh, the first one, I'm sorry. The first picture is the more global. There's Pioneer at the top, and then you can see the playground. Looks almost like a picture from the airline with center pivot sprinklers out there, which is, you can see where the oscillating sprinklers go. And if you look, you can see that kind of in the middle of the page, you can see that asphalt pathway, and then if you go to the second page, you can see a more detailed view of this. And ironically, this was a Google Earth picture when Main Street was tore up, and I don't know how quickly we forget history when that was done. But what we've determined is from that pathway. The pathway is, if you look at the very top of that picture, you can see the pathway is to the right of the fence row. And the fence is actually our property line for Pioneer School District, or for Pioneer School, for Morgan County School District RE3. So you can see the pathway is south of that, I don't know, maybe 10 feet or so. So when we got there this morning, they had installed some posts for that Kaboom fence along the very north side of that pathway. Well, that actually is inside of our property line as opposed to being on the north side of the property line, but it's right on the pathway. So we're going to have a little bit of a no man's land from the fence, which is right on the asphalt path, to our property line to the north, which then joins the city's property line, which is the alley. And we had a representative from the city there, and they're totally okay with that. They'll just incorporate that into the alley and just make that part of the process. But our property line actually goes farther to the north than what this Kaboom fence is going to be. The interesting piece of this is we were, from the title work that I'd researched, that we had a 60-foot piece of ground in there. And so we had the surveyor mark that out, and he actually was, Dr. Hammack and I kind of did a road trip today, look at some other improvements, and we came from the high school, and he was still out there. So we circled back out there, and he'd already staked our property line where the city's alley was, and our property line was, I say, about 5-7 feet north of the pathway, but 60 feet of that to the right over toward that big tall fence row. That fence is about 12 feet onto our property. So nothing to do with the Kaboom playground, and our conclusion was this morning is go ahead and do the fence. And they had already started the fence along the pathway, which kind of makes sense. But we have some concerns about some drainage issues. Now we're going to have kids stopping and playing things on the fence, and the way the water flows, that might be standing on an ice patch. So we're going to do some further analysis to make sure the kids are safe, that they can't, if they're going up to the fence, they're maybe walking them to a spot that's catching some water. So we're going to do everything we can to mitigate that there's no standing water right when they're wanting to do some kind of a play event on the fence. And then we're going to have to circle back around and address this 12-foot of ground that's on farther to the south and where that fence rose, because we have some concern about all this. It's really hard to see from this picture, but there's tons of bushes, and there's just a lot of
So is the fence
fence is gonna be on the,
The left side.
it's on the,
It's gonna be like right
This
fence
is on.
here. That's one of the bigger ones here. It's like
so
right here.
right, so the walkway
Is over here.
is over there. So the kids are gonna be between the fence and the property
And the
fence.
bushes, they're gonna, yeah, it's gonna be, so that there'll be a fence between them and the alley.
Yes, the cars in the alley will be separating from our kids walking on that path by this new fence.
Oh, you can drive through there?
Oh, yeah, it's a fairly traveled alley, and it's a really traveled alley on soccer days, because
Yeah.
people are driving down that alley to get to the Pioneer Field.
So you can come out where the stoplight's at?
Yes, there's a,
Oh. I didn't know.
and that's part of the challenge, as we now create this, we're gonna have to do some barriers so people are not pulling it, because now there's gonna be a fence. So do I go on this side of the fence, or do I drive on this side of the fence? And there's two cutouts in the pavement, one's a walk and one's a drive. So,
And this is paved all the way, because this looks like dirt.
It is paved, it's not great.
It's just like old asphalt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
it's an asphalt path covered with dirt.
Are these bushes or trees, and are they staying?
They are,
They're bushes.
and they're really a lot heavier than it shows in the
That's what I thought, because I'm
picture.
kind of getting past it. And are those going? I mean, they're not gonna.
That's our task that we're concerned about.
They're on-
Now we're creating kids, and they're milling around in the play path and some of this activity, and here's all these bushes.
Right.
Could someone possibly be hanging out back there or something? And so, but that's not gonna be a $5 deal to tear out, because these are big. I mean, big
like
bush.
lilac bushes and stuff.
Some, yeah, they're big, so this project continues to evolve, I guess, and expand, and so that is on RE3's radar. Drainage, we're talking about maybe sealing the asphalt, so we have no toe trip issues in there. And then this bush issue here, and then we'll have to circle back around and address our remaining property boundaries, so we don't theoretically lose that 12 feet from squatters' rights or whatever that would be.
Very nice.
Questions about the play path?
If it's one thing, it's another.
And I think that's probably all you want to know about from me tonight.
Not all.
Oh, I have one more thing. Also on here is revaluing our property coverage. I just got this from our insurance pool. If you can think back to our budget discussions in May and June, that we took a 30% increase in our property insurance just because of the claim loss. Well, this is not improving. They're looking for some input, and I have not responded to them yet. The timing was just good to let the board see this, but you can see the contributions compared to the claim losses, and in the past few years, those numbers are significant. Kind of go down to the middle graph section, you can see the net, in fact, loss from the property transactions, and those figures are just continually growing. And they're looking at their historical and projected surplus, which is the next section. And of course, that number is heading down. And what they're discussing, if you look on page 2 of that, is right now we have full replacement value on our coverage, but a possible alternative would be to give you like a depreciated. If we get a new roof 10 years ago and we have 10 years of life, and then we get a hailstorm, and they're going to depreciate that roof down, and then we would not get the full cost of a new replacement. You'd get the depreciated cost of the roof. And in their example, you could see that if you had a $2 million roof, there would be an additional $1 million that would come out of RE3's pocket for that. Another option would be the functional versus physical damage, that if you have damage to it, but it doesn't really change the functional use of that, like a dented vehicle, then that you may not get a claim for that, because effectively because of the hail. And maybe applying a unique percentage deductible for wind and hail. In this example, if you had $20 million, this would be a fairly large district, but $20 million claim, that you could absorb a 3% deductible because of a wind and hail loss, and our $5,000 deductible, like we just saw on our trailer recap of the Head Start building. So we'd have a $595,000 additional cost to the to bring us back for that particular claim damage. So these are just some options, and I'll need to respond to them, I guess. But I don't know if you have any thoughts or. This is the not good news section of the report here. It's
Mike, isn't this the same thing we were talking about with the old middle school, with the roof?
with the which school, Todd?
With the old middle school with the roof?
Well, that one kind of, but just a little bit twist, because they give us a, and that's, for example, what happened on those modulars. We got an actual cash value settlement from the pool, but then we negotiated maybe a unique deal that if we replace those modulars and effectively replace those via a new building through the new Head Start grant, they said they would give us full replacement value, and that's where that $400,000 of insurance money came from on the modulars. The middle school, they gave us the actual cash value. We elected not to replace the roof, so then we didn't get the remaining full replacement if they would have covered to actually reskin the whole roof. That was
Okay.
that was the middle school discussion. Kind of a little bit different twist, but they're wanting to go one step farther in reducing even the claim payment because of it's mainly the hail is what's killing them. This continues to be an ongoing problem every year. And we have a claim right now from the hail we had last June. And we don't even have the ultimate resolution of that yet. The good news is our roofs, not all of them, but some of them fared fairly well, where we have the roof membrane, and underneath that we have this called a DENS deck. So it's like a shock absorber deck material that's underneath the membrane, so when the hailstone comes down, it gives it a little bit of cush as opposed to knock, on a solid. I mean, there's nothing to absorb the hailstone other than the membrane. This gives a little cushion to it, and those have performed very well. There's additional cost to the district to do that, but that may pay off to us in the long term if we can reduce our claims and then collectively to the whole pool. Now, it doesn't help if we're the only one who does that, but if the pool has less claim loss, then our premiums would be more stable. But expect additional pressure to the insurance fund for the 1920 budget, which, where does that funding come from? Well, it's our transfer from the general fund. So we can almost say the $358 that we're going to get from additional preliminary proposed school financing on a per pupil basis, we're going to have to increase our transfer from general fund to the insurance fund to cover what's more than likely going to be increased premium.
What are the majority of our losses usually? Is it from hail?
Well, our losses have been, we have some auto things backing up, kind of things, really been pretty minimal. If you take out the hail, our losses have been minimal. We had, our episode at the high school, that's probably going to be a 50,000 plus episode with our asbestos issue. But our general claims have been pretty good. We just haven't had a lot of, and governmental immunity has had a pretty significant impact on that. We're showing that we're not negligent, that we have safety procedures in place, formal policies, we follow those, and if there's a claim back against the district, the governmental immunity is a pretty strong defense for the us and the pool. But our hail damage has been significant.
Well, I think it's a sign of the times. Most insurance companies are looking at ways to mitigate wind and hail claims.
And the
Percentage
advantage
deductible
of this
would
is
be
the pool is us. I mean, it's us and our friend, neighbor, school districts. We're all, I mean, it's like our health trust. It's all us. I mean, it's not, there's not a profit incentive in here. It's just, it's all of us pooled together to buy our property and casualty coverage. And they're all kind of experiencing the same episodes. So I'll keep you updated on that as that goes. And do you have a feel for plus and minus? Yeah, we'd consider that, but we sure as heck wouldn't consider that. Or we want full replacement, give us the pricing, what that would cost. Or the dilemma about that is it's much easier for us to price in a full replacement cost to an annual premium, and I can tell you exactly what that's going to be. It's a little bit more challenging when to predict what your losses are going to be and then what those deductibles might be, because I can tell you what the premium is going to be on full replacement, but then we have 3 losses in 1 year. That could easily be a pretty big number. So I'll just keep you
Yeah.
apprised of what develops as we go.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Now I think I'm done. I
Okay,
think so.
Mr. Boyer.
Hi, good evening. One of the action items that you'll approve, or we're asking that you approve later on, is the Senate Bill 10-191 assurances starting in July of 2013, and annually thereafter. Each school district either has to tell the Colorado Department of Education that they're implementing the state model system for evaluations or implementing their own system. We've continually implemented the state model system, and that's for certified staff, including principals, teachers, of course, and then specialized service providers such as audiologists and speech-language pathologists, counselors, those types of folks. And so that's coming later. That's why we have you do it annually. We're supposed to do that. And so that is on the action item. And then just generally, we're still hiring folks and trying to get people in the door. And that's my report. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
You're welcome.
Moving on to discussion items.
So item A is just, I'm not going to go through all those reports, but it just details, our graduation rate sits now at about 82% at our Fort Morgan High School. Obviously, that's less than we would like to see it at. Just to update the board, one thing that we're trying to do as an administrative team this year is look real closely at the fidelity of our support services across our school district. So, for example, last week we met on looking at our Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Our services. We met as an administrative team for about an hour and a half or so, and just talked in terms of the number of students at each building that were receiving Section 504 services. We made sure that that our documents that support Section 504 are all in one place for our principals and our counselors and nurses to be able to access. And then we talked about Lisa Meagle, who oversees Section 504, was with us at that meeting time, and we just walked through and asked, and checked if there were any discrepancies, any gap areas in terms of how we're implementing that. We're going to do that same process with with our portfolio of with MTSS services. We'll do response to intervention next. We will look at our special education services. We're going to relook at the services that we provide for students that have English language learner requirements. And we're going to, again, our goal as an administrative team, we talked about this very early on as we started doing this coherence framework work from the start of the year. We talked very early on about how important it was that we had the same services the best practice for those services replicated across our school district. And I know Dr. Frasco's been very integral to us being able to move out very effectively with that work for this year. So I feel pretty good about that. Next is, and again, Mike Lees talked about the majority of this, but Mike and I met with Mr. Bailey today, just trying to wrap our heads around everything Mike Bailey is doing. And I know he's already talked about the Kaboom Playground. I've just listed out for you, for the members of the Board of Education, a number of different projects that we're looking at. There's a electrical project at the Baker Elementary School. The Baker's getting a majority of these projects, but there's an electrical project about switch gears and power sources, which is beyond me, I must tell you. As soon as I read switch gear, I'm out of my league. But the district has two options there. We can put in all new equipment this spring. But again, Baker is facing, electrical capacity issues on and off fairly frequently. Or we can try to repurpose the electrical boxes and then just actually build new switch gear that would align with those boxes. It's about, Michael Bailey is guesstimating it's around $70,000. And that's one project that we're going to be recommending to the board that we take on, whether it's now or at springtime. There is also a recommendation on a chiller project. We have to replace one chiller, again, at the Baker Elementary School. Our equipment purchased for that has been through Western Mechanical, about $80,000. Again, we're guesstimating on what that would cost. Installation, we're going to need to bid that work out. We have a walkthrough scheduled for this Thursday and then come back to the board with a recommendation. We're estimating that cost at about $50,000. And then system controls for those chillers would be in addition to that. We also have a boiler project. Again, it's Baker Elementary School. Equipment, this is a very large ticket item at about almost $600,000. Bellender Mechanical has done all of the boiler work for the school district. And again, there's systems control issues, or cost, beyond that. No issues right now at Columbine or facility repair issues. No issues right now at Green Acres School. There is a restroom project that we've shown the board before. You folks approved that. We're looking to do that work over the winter break through contracted services or purchase services. There is another chiller project that we need to do at the Sherman Elementary School. Again, about a $60,000 equipment purchase with bid and system controls. And I know Mike Lee has talked to you about the Kaboom Playground. Just to catch you up real quick on the middle school project, I think the HVAC work, Mike Lee, is coming along pretty darn well. We were happy with our last meeting. Group 14, which comes in and does a review of our control systems. I think they've given us a lot of very good advisement. Matt Cooper from Group 14 really was an advocate for us. That was the second group that we had brought in, correct, Mike? There was an initial group before Group 14.
Well, we had another company that was our original commissioning agent. And we felt they had not done a good job with that. Group 14 was on RE3's dime to come in, and they've been our independent arbiter for the whole process, because they can listen to the designers, the controls, the installers, and they can say that is incorrect on behalf of RA3 and hold our other contractors' feet to the fire and say that is not the way it works. And our original cost was $20,000, and we're going to be 30s when this is all said and done. But
Right.
we've more than recovered in value and system and improvements and quality and efficiency, comfort, having them on board.
But at this most recent meeting, the design firm, which would be Branch Pattern, right, used to be
ME Group.
ME Group with Wold. Again, between Branch Pattern and CSI, Mike and I talked. We spent about 4.5 hours at that meeting, and really felt like the HVAC team did a nice job with that. All of the design engineers and implementation engineers associated with that really did a nice job. The warranty log, again, I think we made pretty good progress on that. We spent at least a couple hours going through the warranty log with Jason Frasco, who's just been superb in keeping track of everything, and I think he has another job, another career in his future once he leaves at administration. Something with construction management. The one issue that still is looming out there that we don't have a good resolution to is the fields. According to what Mike Lee Hazelton and I'm trying to think who else weighed in on it. They felt that they had followed and Wold. They felt that the implementation on that field had been in accordance with the planning, and the compaction of it just was not. I don't know. Just had it. It's obviously it's produced a field that our kids can't use right now, and right now there's not a resolution to that.
It's too dang hard.
It's harder than it's a rock.
And we can't grow grass, and it's a runoff problem, and that's the task at hand. And the solution is to effectively re-aerate that whole process, but it's all full of this whole sprinkling system. So really, what needs to happen is we need to come in there and just refluff the field with the further amendments to get the lower compaction rate, but it's got a full sprinkling system in it, and to get down to a 10-inch fluff area like a giant rototiller, we have a sprinkling system in the way.
So that is the one issue that's still confounding to as to what to do. It's very challenging.
Otherwise, sounds like there was some good news.
Yeah, I think in the other two areas we made very significant progress.
Okay, so action item C, an update on the Kaboom Playground pathway.
Well, and Mike Lee already covered that.
Mike already covered that. And we have discussion item D, policies for the third reading.
Right, and again, I haven't made any changes to these. These are the policies that you folks saw, the updated policies from the School Board Association.
And then we have further policies, discussion item E.
And that was the recording secretary policies, and where we had and the board secretary policies. We'd made all those updates to those policies.
No changes.
No changes at all.
I had one question on.
Did I miss something on here?
I don't know if you missed, or maybe I'm just not reading it correctly. On BDA, the board organizational meeting.
Okay, I'm opening it up.
I think I have the same
Maybe I missed
question, Trish.
Yeah, I guess the sixth paragraph down, or sentence, it's just a sentence, after, because the fifth one says, "The president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary shall serve 2-year terms and shall hold office until their successors are elected." The next line then says, "The board shall then appoint a secretary of the board." I'm wondering if we should classify that by saying a recording secretary, because you have secretary just up in the next.
Oh, that's right. I will add that, excuse
Okay.
me.
Yeah, I
Excuse
just
me.
thought it might make it a little more clear.
That was exactly my thoughts.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, apparently.
Thank you.
My apologies.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make
I
sure.
want to make policy challenging for us. In fact, I vaguely, I think someone, picked that up. I missed that one. I do apologize.
Oh, no.
We can add that change when we make a motion on this.
Okay. So make a note to make that change when we get to the action
Yes.
item.
Yeah.
And then discussion item F, I think you kind of.
Yeah, I
that.
just want to catch the board up real quick on some things that, again, Dr. Frasco and the principals are doing to really advance instruction for the quality of the school district. Again, I think the board's aware of this, but I'm just very, very, very proud of the work that we've been doing. Our principals and assistant principals and Dr. Frasco and myself, we're spending approximately 2.5 hours every day beyond their evaluation model in classrooms, watching teachers teach and giving them feedback on what we see. And I'll tell you, almost to a person, isn't this accurate, Rena? They're getting feedback, they're getting responses from the teachers about, I've had 2 or 3 teachers write me already this year and thank me for, and respond to the comments they're getting from their principals and saying, hey, I'm gonna implement this right away and get better. So, we spent a lot of time, again, I think I've said to you before, Dr. Frasco led a review of the performance frameworks for every school in our district. She has led the unified improvement planning process with our principals and assistant principals for every school in our district. And then I work with the principals on their evaluation on their evaluation piece through RANDA. Every single thing that we do is aligned with our problem statements, and every single thing that every single instructional initiative we take on is aligned with what our data is telling us about areas for improvement. Our instructional coaches in leading our school improvement process have been superb. A byproduct to this, I'll tell you, Arena and I have had, Dr. Frasco and I have had 2 or 3 principals come up to us and say, hey, Dr. Hammock and Dr. Frasco, I know this is not an instructional piece per se, but our discipline referrals have gone down because we've been in the classroom. Jason Frasco, for example, said dramatic reduction in disciplinary referrals. Dramatic reduction. So I know it's a lot of work. Again, I think in average schools across our country, principals spend about 6 minutes a day in classrooms. Our people are spending 2.5 hours a day. And the next piece, I think you can see at the bottom there, the next piece we're going to be incorporating the use of a very distinguished program called Teach Like a Champion. And in fact, again, Dr. Frasco is going to lead this work with our principals tomorrow. The first thing we're going to look at it again, we want to take this, we want to make sure that we don't put too many goal areas out there. We want to have just a few goal areas because you're much more likely, right, to achieve those. So we're going to be looking at how do our teachers know that students have learned something? How do they have knowledge of results? How do they check for understanding? It's a CF check, checking for understanding, and we're going to be using that model again through Doug Lemov, and then we tie that to these walkthroughs, and then we'll be doing another 8 weeks of these instructional rounds. So
I liked how in the Teach Like a Champion where it talked about the check for understanding is not to be confused with tests or quizzes or, I'm like, that's great. I mean, I
right,
think
because
that's,
by that time that student has left your class. But I'll tell you, some of the feedback that we're getting, and Michael Boyer has gone out with us to get a better understanding of the instructional process. Nancy Hopper, Lisa Meagle have all been involved. But I'll tell you, we have seen some fantastic teaching on the part of our teachers, where kids are actively involved in the learning, and of course we've seen some areas for improvement. But boy, to a person, I've heard nothing but positive things back from our teachers. Nothing. And this is a paradigm shift for our school district. And again, I'm telling you, as superintendent, I can't tell you how proud I am of our people.
Thank you, Dr. Hammack.
Thank you.
If I could interject one just quick thing, just so there's no confusion here.
Did I miss you on the instructional rounds?
That was an intentional miss on my part. I didn't get out of the third grade spelling
My
class.
apologies.
In our annual budget document, we give you our capital replacement plan and list all of our multi-year projects. Included in there was the Baker boiler. That was a planned process. We budget for air conditioning replacements every year, and we also have an electrical repair budget that we allocate in our ongoing maintenance project. The switchgear at Baker is a complete replacement of the total panel, and you go to your garage and in your house and you click the switches off. This is a replacement of the complete panel. We've just had some odd electrical failures at Baker, and we've had multiple engineers and stuff, and it's an older system, and we're going to upgrade that to new technology. That particular piece has not been in our overall capital replacement. The chiller budget we have in there, but the Baker chiller is a full replacement of that unit, and there's additional cost because we're converting from the R22 Freon that we kind of talked to the board about before to that A410 newer version of that. So this is a more expensive project, and we're going to be able to do Baker and Sherman's chiller, half of Baker, half still works. We're doing the half that doesn't work. And one at Sherman has not been working, but we've used that non-working unit to provide parts for the other ones. And Sherman's temperature has been well maintained because of that. But that is a kind of up and above the line item that we have. So Dr. Hammack and I had some discussions about this. We just want to make sure there's no confusion on the board's part whether you want to have a special action item at a special meeting or follow-up. The dilemma is we have some time constraints here because as we talked before with the board, we're looking at doing the electrical panel replacement during spring break, and we're looking to do the chiller at spring break. The boiler won't be clear till next summer, but there's some time frames because there's some manufacturing issues and some design issues that have to go, and there's some price increases coming, so we're kind of under a time constraint.
And Mike, as you and I said, and the board, I think, when you approve an item, you're obviously you're under Open Meetings Act. There's transparency requirements under Open Meetings Act. I think as long as you had budgeted for that item, and that's the discussion you and I had, then I think my feeling is you've met the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. I think if you haven't budgeted, then you did not meet the requirement.
So it sounds like part of that isn't part of the budget process, so.
Yeah, and
In a kind of a global extent, I think we've addressed those, and we're budgeting for our total cap replacement plan, but specific line items, the expanded chiller replacement and the switch gear replacement, you can't go to that and see those two specific items. So I just want to make sure that if we want to circle back around, we're probably going to need to do that in a special meeting.
Right.
If you want that specific approval, or if you can view our long-term capital replacement plan and our appropriation for the capital reserve fund as your approval to do that. There's a little bit of grayness in there, I guess, but otherwise we'll come back for everything we do. But these are pretty big projects. The biggest one is clearly in the plan. You've already approved that plan, the boiler, which is the biggest one.
Right.
These other two aren't quite as large.
And that was about, what, 600,000?
600 grand.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be
We
confusion about
just didn't know that's timeframes until it was,
this morning.
yeah, we just didn't have time to meet that 24-hour notification.
Well, personally, and I'm not a contractor or, don't understand all the boiler, chiller, electrical stuff, but, I mean, you've had a plan to do this replacement, and it's not like you have a crystal ball to know exactly what's going to go wrong, when it's going to go wrong. I think that it's been, I don't think these are huge, crazy asks. I mean, I'm fine with you going ahead and doing what you need to do to keep things running. I don't feel like we need to do this as a special meeting because we've already approved the budget. It may not look exactly like what we originally thought, but how would you know that it was the whole gear, thing, instead of just, that's the technical term. Instead of.
You forgot the $100,000, whatchamacallit.
Yeah, how would you know that? I mean.
Yeah, I echo Trish.
Yeah, in a normal.
I agree as well.
In a normal course, we would have done a courtesy revisit, and we've already prepped the board on all three of these projects.
Mm-hmm.
It just at this time frame that we found about this morning, we've got some deadline issues that have immediately kind of appeared, which we apologize for not having enough foresight to see those out farther. But I think you've addressed those, and we've surely approved those as part of our capital replacement. They aren't exactly line items, so if you want to address that by line item, we can do a special, or our global capital replacement plan that addresses all, those things are all in there, but not specifically a new switchgear replacement at Baker School.
I think if on a global basis we're meeting our meeting requirements and there's no objections by the board, I think we're fine with it.
I agree. Yep.
So, another thing we could do, Mike. Now, I was thinking of that we have a special meeting coming up, but you can only act on items that are on a special meeting. You can't add to a special meeting.
So I think our disclosure to the community is fully there, and we've discussed this already before. Just this weird ordering issue has come up, and there's some window issues. If we don't get this done, we're not going to be able to meet the manufacturing deadlines for ordering, to put this in place by March, for example, on the cooler unit at Baker. And could we survive? Probably, but we'll send all the complaints for the hot on the third floor to the board's personal email account, so.
Well, I think you're being prudent to get it done because you're getting it within the manufacturer's deadline and prior to potential cost increases. So I think it's good to just proceed.
I think the important thing is not an expenditure above and beyond what we've already approved from the budget. It's still within our.
That is absolutely a
Yeah.
true statement.
Yes.
Well, I think everybody has a comfort level with it, so.
Mhm.
Let's move on to the consent agenda. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the consent agenda, we have 2 items, the personnel action report and the list of checks. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move
to
to approve the consent
I
agenda.
will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
I believe I have a conflict of interest due to one of the checks being to my business, so I'll abstain.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to the action items. Action item A, consideration to approve policies on third reading.
Move to approve the policies on third reading.
Okay, is there any, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Motion passes. Action item B, consideration to approve policies on Board of Education Recording Secretary on third reading, and we were going to make a minor wording change in that if possible.
I move that we approve the policies on Board of Education and Recording Secretary on third reading with the addition of the clarification of that we will appoint a recording secretary on policy BDA.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Motion passes. Action item C, consideration to approve the Head Start grant.
I move we approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Head Start grant. Any discussion?
I just want to make just two comments. There's a couple things in the appendix that have to be added. One being the geographic location. It's required under the grant, but I had already posted it to the board, so there's going to be one additional document in the appendix. And then in the third, it's named the third file, so this will be 3 files that are submitted to the federal government. The third file is essentially the most recent audit, and I am still having Mike look through that piece for me. And then in the recompetition, first 73 pages at the very end, in the budget justification piece, there are pieces with the non-federal share. So in order to meet the non-federal share, we have to be at 20% or higher. And so I'm working with Mike to verify that my numbers are, there's just one number that I'm looking at for the space that we utilize is changing a little bit with the new wing. And so the depreciation amount, it's a little complex, but just making sure that those numbers are fairly accurate. And then the documents that are not in here are the documents that specifically get uploaded besides these 3 files into grants.gov, including an SF424. So it's basically just kind of revisiting the budget on a different worksheet that the federal government would like to have, along with 4 or 5 other documents that just basically say that we have a site location, here's the address of it. And so other than that, it's pretty much ready to be uploaded to grants.gov as soon as we have approval.
I'd just like to thank you, Dr. Frasco, and Mike, whoever's assisted you with this whole process for taking it on.
Point of clarification, I hate to correct Dr. Frasco.
But he will.
She's not working with me, she's waiting on me. A big distinction there.
That's a good
Steve.
Okay, is there any more discussion or questions regarding the Head Start grant? Okay, roll call.
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smith.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. And that brings us to action item D, consideration for the board to approve required Senate Bill 10-191 assurances.
Move to approve the required Senate Bill 10-191 assurances.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smith.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. So that concludes the action items. Next, we have our advanced planning. Our next meeting is Monday, November 12th at 5:30, which will be a work session. Then our next regular meeting is December 3rd, and also this weekend, November 10th, is the Kaboom sidewalk painting. So what time does that start?
9:30.
9:30? Okay. So anybody that's not making the trek over to Grand Junction, unfortunately, I won't be able to make it because we'll be on our way over to Grand Junction for the state football game.
Picking my son up
Playoff
from the
game.
airport.
Yay.
So,
It's
okay.
going to be a long trip.
Yes, it is. So that brings us to executive session. A, for personnel matters, according to CRS 24-6-402, subsection 4, and subsection B.
I move we go to executive session for personnel matters, CRS 24-6-402, subsection 4, subsection B.
Could you invite Dr. Hammock?
And I would like to invite Dr. Hammock as well.
And Mr. Moore.
And Mr.
Boyer.
Boyer. And Mr. Boyer as well.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to roll call.
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Lauren Sharp.
Aye.
Melissa Smith.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. It's 8:20. We are adjourning the regular part of the meeting, and we are adjourning in executive session.